Into the Metaverse.
Guys, Rejinx here. This is episode 2 of Into the Metaverse. We are talking about all the virtual worlds and possible worlds created for us in VR. Today we're going to talk about Orbus's new DLC recently released, which added climbing mechanics to the game. And we're also going to talk about movement systems in VRMMOs, whether that's blinking, dashing, sliding, climbing, or floating. To help me here today, I have Denmo. What's up, Denmo?
Hey man, how you doing?
And my buddy Mishka. How's it going, Mishka?
Oh, it's going great.
So Mishka still plays a lot of Orbus and is in one of the current top guild in Orbus. And Denmo's an old friend of mine from Nova, and still a friend of mine, I guess. But
oh yeah, ouch, man. Woo! Getting hard.
So I guess first we'll start talking about the mini story pack that just came out for Orbus. I played a little bit of it this week, but I know Mishka, you've played a lot more than I have. How are you liking it so far?
Yeah, so I finished the main story of it. I haven't quite gotten to the side quest yet, but it is a ton of fun. They added 3 new zones and a new dungeon. Each of the zones are about as big as all the other zones are, map-wise. They added some old game pre-born monsters back, which is nice. You can fight the Kelpies again.
Yeah,
they got the dudes from the desert. Yeah, it's a nice little throwback to some of the old stuff that we used to have, and it added variety. Great. Yeah,
and I feel like the new zones look better than the zones in the overworld currently. Like, they really did a good job. The little lizard dudes are adorable.
Oh yeah.
And the story, well, the story's not bad. Like, it's pretty straightforward and easy to understand, and I enjoyed I haven't played through all of it, but I've helped the first little village, and it seems pretty cool. Like, how did you like the story all the way through, or do you even read it?
Yeah.
You did?
I read through it. I like to get into the roleplay aspect, and there's a little bit of like sleuthing around. There's some investigative work that needs to be done as well. And there is kind of the whole, I need to save the village, but it's not an overarching like you're saving the world. You're the only one that can. And I really don't like that whole, you're the only one. You're the main hero. I like the kind of low key. Hey, help out our village. This is going on. Anything you can do. So I liked it. I thought it was a ton of fun, the whole story.
I agree. And so I actually said whenever they announced it that I wasn't too sure. I'm like, well, it's $10 for a bunch of Quest and Orbus, and Quest and Orbus aren't that fun, to be honest. But I do feel like this is better than what was in the original game, well, the original Reborn. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. Now, what about the dungeon? I didn't even realize they added a dungeon.
You can't shard it. It's more of a solo dungeon kind of thing. You can go through and solo the entire thing, and it's meant to be that way. It's interesting to add that. They had the climbing mechanics in there as well. There's different areas that you can go to that climb. There's an escort quest in there, and there's a ton of mobs. It's great. It's great for farming XP, and I think they still drop items. When they first released it, there were a very high rate of major shard and glimmering shard items, so the blue and purple. And that was fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Because, shards are the best way to make a little extra income, and they're useful, too.
Oh, yeah.
So, the climbing mechanics you mentioned, how do you like them?
I was pleasantly surprised. I get very, very easy motion sickness. It really doesn't take much to knock me out, and I'll have to take the headset off and give, like, an entire day of rest. But the whole climbing mechanic, going up the vines, going across on the tight ropes, as I call them, surprisingly no motion sickness. I don't know what they did or how they caused it to not happen, but I thought it was pretty awesome.
So, unfortunately, I had the exact opposite experience. Well, I rarely get motion sickness, and while they didn't make me sick to my stomach, they made me feel a little funky, and my wife, who played with me, and she does get a good bit of motion sickness, she quit after 15 minutes. She's like, I can't do it. Like, she was trying to climb with her eyes closed so that it wouldn't make her sick, and she was having, you would teleport through it into the wall behind it. Like,
oh, yeah.
And it got to the point where the climbing mechanic was the only part of the new stuff we didn't like, so we were trying to like almost work to not do the climbing. And it was disappointing because I didn't feel like it added anything to the game because there was no point. Now, I didn't get as far as you did, but it didn't seem like you were ever like fighting while climbing or doing anything interesting. It was just pulling my arms up and hitting my ceiling with my hands a couple times and then getting to the next area.
Yeah, so you do need to climb for some of the quests. There are, and some of the treasure maps as well, there are areas that are elevated up there. I don't remember it being necessary for the main quest, except for in the lair, in that solo dungeon. You do need to do that. There's one spot you need to climb. But yeah, no, I don't know if it's just that I've acclimated to Orbus, but yeah, there is no motion sickness going up and across. And I was expecting it. Like, when especially going across on the tightrope, I was like, oh man, this is going to knock me out. All right, we're going. Okay, that's cool, I guess.
And maybe I didn't get into the flow of it, but I felt like the tightropes were really long.
Yeah, what I ended up doing was, instead of like doing the whole like, grapevine monkey kind of thing, I pulled myself up and I just kind of like almost barely scooted. It made it faster and easier.
So you just kind of, that might be the better way to do it. Yep.
Yeah, the fact that there's no falling, that's what I was terrified of the most. Even in games like Rec Room, if I fall any significant distance, it throws me off. I feel like I'm actually falling in real life. I feel like I'm going to be sick. The fact that they made sure that you cannot actually fall, that was a saving grace for me.
Okay. So $9.99, you feel like fair deal for what you got?
Oh, easily, yeah. I mean, I bought the game for $40. It dropped to $20 lately. $10 for essentially doubling the map size. Yeah, that's fair.
So I definitely enjoyed it. I do wish, which I understand, Orbus is a small community. You don't want to ever fragment your community, but it didn't feel like, for an in-game person, there's no progression that was added at all. Like, the only thing you get from it is cosmetics, which, everybody likes to look good, but I guess if they would have added a free dungeon with it, like, that's available to everybody, but tied into it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, in-game point of view, like me and the people in my guild, yeah, there's really not much there that we're gonna, that really motivated us, except just to do it. But, like I said, in the lair, they were dropping a much higher chance of blue and purple items, and those shards are very much a valuable commodity. So, somebody like me who plays the markets a lot, that was great for me, because I'm like, hey, I don't have to spend, 3 mil dram anymore to keep buying these shards. I can just stay here in the lair, exit, come back, and keep farming them.
Well, and I guess you could, because anytime you get a legendary weapon, like, shard farming becomes, like, super important, right? Because, like, you want to get those perfect affixes, and usually you wait till you get one affix you like, and you're like, you know what, I'm good enough. I'll keep bleed as the second affix, or treasure hunter, because it's close enough.
Yeah, you get that first one, and you're like, do I really want to re-roll this? Because effervescence, they're not cheap.
No. Which, how many glimmerings to get an effervescence? It's like 20, right?
20 glimmerings, yeah. It ends up being like 6,000 minor shards if you start small and go all the way up. So it's a hefty price to pay.
Nice. So, okay. Well,
I think I have 4.
So yeah, since we're already talking about movement in games, so is there any other game that you've done climbing in, Denmo?
So I played the climb, and I've also messed around with the climbing mechanics in the Tavern Talk from Elysia. Yeah. So obviously the climb mechanics are a little more refined because the whole game is built around that, right? And this was a very early build of Elysia's Tavern Talk, just to kind of show off the area and what they're thinking. Now, the cool thing that Elysia did with their climbing mechanics compared to the climb, which is going for a realism, is that in order to actually get to certain areas, they allow you to slingshot yourself, right? So you'll grab on, and then pull up really fast and kind of launch it, and you throw your hands up and you grab the next thing above you, and you can kind of jump climb that way to get over obstacles. It was pretty fun, and I think it was just 'cause I was getting lower frame rates during that time, but I was actually feeling a tad bit ill after a while, and then I kind of fought through it, and I felt better after taking a little bit of a break. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of horizontal climbing. You can definitely fall, so at least at the moment you can. I'm sorry, Mishka. Plus with the slingshot climbing, you're kind of going to be falling upwards, as you're flying through the air and trying to grab onto things. So that might be a little bit rough. So we'll see how they actually end up implementing it, or if it's just something they were testing or not. Because I think climbing is going to be a very big mechanic in that game. So, and then in the climb itself, I mean, I always found it kind of relaxing, unless you're trying to like really speed climb it. That's just reach up here, pull up here, kind of. It's like a puzzle game, but with your hands, just trying to go higher and to the right and get to the top. So, yeah, I mean, movement-wise and climbing-wise, those are kind of the games that come to my mind at the moment.
So, I guess my question is, in a VR MMO, do you think that climbing should be required? Like, I guess if a game's built around it, like you said, if it's a core part of it, certain players are just going to have to accept that. I guess they would have to accept that there's an accessibility issue with their game. Or do you think that they should make it all just extra? Like, what do you think, Mishka? Like, do you think you should be able to play the game without ever climbing? Or that there should be some alternative way to get to areas that might take longer?
Yeah, whenever it comes to movement, especially in VR, I like having options. Because, the more options there are, the more I can see what's going to totally knock me out of VR for the rest of the day. And what, even if it takes me longer, but I can continue to play, I'm going to stick with that option. Yeah. So, mandatory? No. Make it a shortcut, make it a lot easier? Sure. That's fine. Just as long as there's accessibility.
That's accessibility, I think, is going to be a word we say a lot today, because when it comes to movement systems, we can see what's possible, and you start thinking way out there. But unfortunately, what somebody sees as an amazing movement system, something that just feels great, to somebody else is a horrible roller coaster that they're incapable of playing. Well, like, have you played any of the shooters, Mishka, with slide motion? Are you able to play those?
Yeah, so Onward and Pavlov, it took me quite a while to adjust. So like in Onward, I'd play like 1 or 2 missions, and then I'd have to put it down for the rest of the day. I think Skyrim VR, Fallout VR, those took me way longer than any other game that I can think of. And I can't go more than like an hour or 2 in either of them without having to, essentially put it down and be done. Back in my old house, I had like a huge bathtub. It was like a spa. It had jets and everything. And anytime I started to feel really sick, I'd just like go take a really long hot bath, come back, I'd feel better. But that's not an option anymore.
It sounds like you're willing to push through a lot more than what a lot of players are probably going to. Because that's what the hard thing is. If somebody gets sick, they have to stop then. Like, you can't just push through, right? But you have to keep coming back. You have to keep coming back. And most people do seem to, like, my wife also has VR sickness issues. But in Orbus, she eventually got through all of it. And it seems to go away with constant practice. It's just, I guess, convincing a nauseous person, hey, just come back tomorrow. You'll try it again.
Yeah, so, like, for anybody that has VR sickness, like, don't push through it. Like, once you start feeling sick, don't push through it. You're not going to feel better. It's not, you're not going to fight through it. Put it down, give it some time, wait till you're feeling good again, and you got to keep coming back. And, slowly you'll acclimate. Like I said, Orbus, whether I'm sliding, teleporting, climbing, or anything like that, I don't get the VR sickness anymore. But I've sunk, 2,000-something hours into the game. Things like Skyrim, Fallout, things that I have fewer hours in. I haven't acclimated to it. It's a world I'm unfamiliar with. Things move differently, and you got to take your time.
I actually wanted your take on, so for instance in Orbus, they do the blackout edges for dragon racing, right? Does that tend to help you quite a bit to have like things fade out and kind of center more on like a point in front of you? I mean, I find it very annoying to have my vision blocked out, but I don't know if that actually helps you or if that's just as annoying to someone who gets a little motion sick from games or not.
I don't remember because I haven't done a dragon race in over 4 months.
I mean,
and for me, it's not necessarily that like it's boring or I don't like it. It's just it does make me sick. That in particular.
No, so dragon racing makes me sick too, actually. And I'm kind of I don't have a rock stomach like Denmo, but I still dragon racing does it. Like if I do dragon racing for more than 20 minutes, like when you have to do second chance and you just keep missing all the time because it's freaking way too hard. Like
it has the vignetting, but it's still the way things move. No.
So we talked about what makes us sick. Now let's talk about like what we what we like, right? So Denmo, what movement system have you done in VR so far that you're like, man, this is like the one. This is the one I want. I want Sword Art Online or whatever, the big VR MMO. I wanted to use this movement system.
So I really like smooth locomotion, but I don't think most people do. But I really like it because I feel like it's more immersive. When I start teleporting around, I just feel like it kind of breaks my immersion in the game, unless there is a reason for me to teleport around. Like, say, like, I have this teleportation gun. Like, oh, that's why I do it. But if I just hit a button and I teleport somewhere, it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. And sometimes mechanics demand that you use teleportation as your movement style, which is fine. I like it because it kind of adds another mechanic. But at the same time, like, oh, I wish there was a way to do it where it integrates my play style a little more into it. But at the moment, even though VR is starting to take off, it's still very fledgling. And so people just aren't used to a lot of different styles of movement, right? So teleportation movement is, I think, the go-to way for a beginner to get used to the game, right? That and snap turning. And then once you feel comfortable doing that and you want to try something else, go for it. If it doesn't work for you, not a big deal. It's all about comfort. It's all about accessibility, our magic word of the day, right? And don't let anyone try to tell you how to enjoy your game, right? They say you have to do this or that. Like, no.
I'm with you. That slide motion, to me, is the best way to move in VR currently. But even so if you add teleportation, and Orbus had to deal with this early on, and they went with teleportation is in combat. We have teleportation combat. But the problem with that is that it makes, especially in PvP situations, it makes it not feel good at all. Like, so I almost feel like I like the Pavlov solution of, hey guys, we're sorry, it just works better with slide motion. Hope you can get used of it. There is no teleportation in our game. Like, it's tough because I don't have to deal with that issue. But I feel like most people can get used of it, and it opens up completely different styles of combat compared to ones like, if you want to make it where moving through the world you can still teleport, I'm all for that. But in combat, having constant teleportation makes people so hard to hit. It makes just certain things just not work. What do you think about it, Mishka?
So I'm somebody who hunts people down in PvP on almost a daily basis. I go around, I try to find them. And yeah, one of my tactics in PvP is just constant short-range teleports, just constantly jumping, because they can't hit me. It's next to impossible to hit somebody who's just, doing 4 or 5 short-range jumps every second and a half. So it's cheap. It is. It's dirty. But it works.
I mean, I wasn't going to call you an asshole to your face.
Hey, in PvP, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
Hey, if those letters are red, you've consented to me killing you, so.
That's the thing I'll never get, man, is people who go out there with red letters and then they get very upset when someone kills them. Like,
oh, yeah.
what are you doing? What are you doing, man? Like, the stakes. Like,
yeah.
What do you think about if a game, like one of these future games, just says, you know what, I'm sorry, guys, in combat, there is no teleport except for certain skills that might teleport you or whatever?
So when it comes to PvP, all for it. Like we were saying, games like Pavlov, Onward, in Orbus and PvP, turn off the teleportation. I'm all for that, because that's an optional component, right? When it comes like PvE stuff, I'm all for options, like we were saying, accessibility. Just because, again, when I was starting off in Orbus, I wouldn't do any smooth locomotion. It was all snap turn and short teleportation, because I couldn't do the locomotion. It took me hundreds of hours to get used to it. But PvP, yeah, it's kind of cheap. I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to get rid of it.
Gotcha. Every game's going to have to make that choice separately, because ultimately VR, unfortunately, removes accessibility by its nature. In that, like, if you add any mechanic that's physical, there is some people that cannot do it. Right. Some people don't have good arm movement, some people don't have good leg movement, some people can't bend down, some people can't stand for long periods of time. So unfortunately, like, almost every game as they build it is slowly carving off certain amounts of the community that can't do it with this mechanic and can't do this thing. But the idea of having different classes that fulfill different roles that might be more accessible than others. That's a good thing that Bard has for it, for example. Bard is pretty accessible as a sitting class, right? Like,
yeah, you can sit, and I think my favorite part is you can do it one-handed.
Yeah.
You can heal the entire party. I know that one of the members of, I think it's either Alphabet or Firefly, he only has one working controller. But he plays Bard as a one-handed Bard. He's able to heal, Shard 15s, hard mode raids. He's able to heal everything in the game as a one-handed Bard. So that's accessibility right there.
That's true. One thing that I'm hoping will fix it is that as hardware progresses, so right now I feel like we're at a point in VR where VR is technically possible a little bit, but like 5-10 years from now, once displays get better and graphics cards get better, do you think, Mishka, because I know you have a little bit of motion sickness, do you think you'll have less motion sickness at like 144 hertz if it was just smooth 144 frames a second all the time?
Most likely. I'm running a mid-level graphics card on a Rift CV1, so I get 90 frames max, and that routinely drops to 45, and that does mess with me. So if you're getting a smooth, 44, I've never seen 144 frames out, in VR. I can just imagine how beautiful and how amazing and how smooth it is.
It's nice.
It's wonderful.
But I imagine that would probably help as somebody who, fluctuates all over. Yeah, smoothness would help.
Gotcha. The hope is that a lot of our accessibility problems kind of go away as the world becomes more acclimated and as our hardware becomes more capable of handling the technology, right?
Oh, yeah.
So is there any systems that you haven't seen tried or you've seen tried in a single-player game that you think, man, this would just be awesome in VRMMOs?
Not that I can think of. As far as I'm concerned, like I said, options, more accessibility you got, the better. The only downside I can think of that is that something's going to become meta, and if you can't do it, you're not going to be able to perform at the highest level of the game.
That's understandable.
Yeah. So kind of like we were talking about with Orbus PvP, smooth locomotion is awesome, but then teleportation is the meta. The more options you have, the more people can play, but then the more something's going to become meta, and you got to try to balance that in some way. But that's a problem for people who are way smarter than I am.
Well, and unfortunately, so I'm about to go the opposite direction. So, again, one of these guys that I played, have you ever played any of the Echo Arena or Echo Combat or Lone Echo?
Yeah, whatever the free one was.
Yeah, so it's I think that's Echo Arena where you have to throw the ball or whatever. Well,
yeah,
it uses it's basically for people who haven't played it, it's in 0G, and you grab onto the walls and you can launch yourself off the walls to get to places. And then if you get stuck in the middle, you're not just stuck if you're stuck in the middle. You actually have thrusters on your wrist that you can use to control yourself to get to wherever you need to go. And I absolutely love that control scheme. And in my mind, I could picture a game similar to like Elite Dangerous or some kind, a space hybrid type game, or even like No Man's Sky, like where you go from different space station to space station. So this game, you would probably never go down to a planet, but you would fly in a regular spaceship in like a cockpit mode, but then when you get to space stations, and even you might have like dungeons or whatever that are in space stations where you use that floating mechanic. I just think that would be so amazing, just to see 30 people flying around a space station and like interacting while holding on to stuff. And it's more realistic to what I think space is going to be like ultimately in the future, you know what I mean? And you could have some walking, or like if there's like a circle around the base that has artificial gravity, but I just think that would be such an amazing game. So that's like, in my mind, that would like cockpit to 0G would be just really cool. What about you, Denmo? Do you have anything that you've tried that you're like, man, like this would be really cool in a VR MMO?
There's always going to be some things, right, that you're going to think like, oh man, I wish I could, bring this over from this and, combine these two things together and make it work, right? So for instance, what you were talking about with your gravity situation with Lone Echo, that's really cool. Like I've been playing it a little bit. We talked about this before. I've really enjoyed that quite a bit. Now, I can see it working well. I like the free motion of it and be able to get up and over things. I think that you might be trying to kill Mishka if that game came out. You would have to have very hardy VR legs to be spending a lot of time doing that, especially with how hectic having a lot of people in an MMO, come together and all these different things happening. There's one thing that I could bring over. I think just doing like some rudimentary tasks, right? Like in Grand Theft Auto, right? You walk out, you open a car door, you get in the car door, you close it, you drive off. I like the idea of getting so immersed into a game where it's just like every action is just like something I do, so it's not tedious. You open it, everything like that. I want it to be as realistic as possible while there's like a giant dragon breathing fire down on me, or
exactly.
or blasting from there. Yeah, I want it to be almost surreal and be like, oh yeah, I'm so used to it. I was just reading my newspaper, and all of a sudden, a bunch of goblins attacked, and so I had to grab my battle axe and go and fight these guys or cast some spells or whatever. With a cup of coffee in hand as I'm drinking it to get my caffeine buff.
Well, so have you played Half-Life Alyx yet?
I haven't downloaded, and I have not. No, I just haven't had time to do it.
So, because I will say, like, again, Half-Life Alyx is single player. I'm speaking of it more of a proof of concept to what could be. So it is the closest thing to what you said, in that like every space that has, if there's stuff, you can touch this stuff. Like, and not just touch it like, oh, I pressed the button and pick it up. Like literally, I can just take my hand and just move it over. There is something like little things, and I was actually playing PokerStars VR last night. It makes me feel more immersed in almost any game I've ever played, because it's a very narrow focus game, right? You're playing poker around a table with other people, and that's all you're doing. There's little things it does that makes that feel like you're really doing it in real life, but it's in a very narrow field. What you want is to be able to do that and then get up and walk through the double door of the saloon and then shoot a guy in the street, steal his horse, and then run to the next town over, right? Like, that's where we want to get. Yeah.
Can you imagine taking the touch everything aspect, like fully interactive Half-Life Alyx, like you were describing, combine it with the physics from Boneworks, and then throw both those together into a VR MMO? I think that would be those two things combined would probably be what I'd want to see the most.
Hey, $500 million, we could have that in 2 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Come on, get on this.
Dude. I'll be so it sounds, which I say that flippantly, but it just takes a company to take the risk and say, you know what? It has to be a company that's making hardware. So I'm going to use this product to sell headsets. And I mean, to me, Valve proved that that's a thing. And then coronavirus stopped them from being able to produce the headsets. But like when Half-Life Alyx was announced, immediately their headset just sold out and has been sold out. And it's because they're making a game that people really are thirsting for. And I think if you put the money in a real VR MMO or a real social experience, like people are going to just feel like they have to have it, right? And it's going to sell headsets and then move the whole genre forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's with every headset, though. I mean, I don't know if Half-Life Alyx was just such a big deal that it carried over to, Quest, because you can use a link cable to play it. You have your Rift S. I mean, the only thing that didn't really get sold out immediately was the Cosmos, just because it has quite a few issues.
So while we're still talking about VRMMOs in motion, do you think there's any accessories? So, like, lately I've seen a bunch of VR YouTubers doing videos about the Cyber Shoes. Apparently, Cyber Shoe has just been sending out to YouTubers, right? Have y'all seen the Cyber Shoes? Do y'all know what that is?
Yeah.
No, apparently I'm not a big enough YouTuber.
Oh, okay. Well, so all it is it's like a chair that can spin around 360 that you sit on, and they send you a pad, and then you strap these roller skates almost to the bottom of your feet, and then you USB connect them to your computer. And the way you move inside the game is you sit on this chair and then you rub your feet against the ground like you're trying to like walk while you're sitting. And that's how you move forward in the game, or backwards. Yeah, so it's basically like the cheap answer to, what's it called, the Infinideck?
Oh, like the treadmill kind of thing?
Like the Ready Player One infinite treadmill.
Yeah. Yeah, that, and then there's also the Cat VR, which is, I think in between those two with quality.
Well, and then there's the Omni thing, which is the one that straps your owner in the circle and then puts you in a bowl, and you use special shoes to, like, slide against the edges of it. Those are very expensive and very limiting. The cyber shoes is much. I think it's $400 for the cyber shoes, which is like, it's a price, right? But it's not.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Unaffordable.
Everyone's got that stimulus check, so go buy a pair of cyber shoes.
So, I personally don't think the cyber shoes are the answer, but do you think that there's more accessory? Like, do you think there's any more accessories that are going to come out for VR that become standard in the long term? That, like, for movement, like foot tracking, or like a lot of people are talking about hand tracking, like systems using hand tracking without controllers. I personally think that has very limited value due to needing to press buttons to fire a gun or open a menu. Like, it's really hard to do with hand tracking because you can't feel pressure. Is there any accessories that you think, man, this is going to be the next step in VR MMOs?
I mean, I thought the Omni treadmill thing was a really cool concept. The only problem I saw with it is that there's going to be drift, right? When you stop moving, it's still going to drift a little bit. And I'm going to tell you right now, that would kill me. I would be puking my guts out if I'm not moved. Like, if I'm used to, moving and I stop moving, I'm going to die. I'm going to hope that I had a lot of liquids in me and not so many solids. But I don't know, like, what was it called, the shoe thing?
Cyber shoes.
Cyber shoes. I don't know how I feel about that. Because, like, sitting down and walking at the same time, that...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Most people, the reviews are mixed. Most people are like, it's not bad. But it seems like more of a gimmick than a standard.
I feel like there's a lot of dissonance there.
But what about, so the one thing I was thinking is, like, full body tracking right now is far from standard, but I do have friends that have it, and it seems like there's value to it. Do you think running in place is a valid movement scheme?
Well, I mean, it really depends on how sweaty you want to get. It could be. I know there's some games where you literally in dust. You go like this with your arms, and that's how you run, right? You don't move your feet, but you're actually moving your upper torso, right? And so, I mean, that's a way to get around to be, if you want to be more physically active. You don't have to move that way, but I mean, that's just one of their movement styles. I think that with full body tracking, it'd be really cool, especially with. It seems like lately a lot of people have also been talking about these haptic vests quite a bit and these haptic feedback equipment, right? So if you can implement full body tracking into your haptic gear, without having to have extra accessories, this is like one full package. Well, I guess then they get best of both worlds, right? But I get so hot. Like, I backed the Chilladex when it came out, which I think will be standard for index users, because my God, that thing gets very warm, and I cannot wait for mine to come. I mean, there's been a lot of announcements. A lot of it is not going to be for consumer use. It's going to be for, like, private industry and for, like, teaching and, things like that. So, like, there's the new gloves that instead of having haptic feedback, they literally just limit your motion when you come in contact with something.
That's kind of the holy grail, but it looks super expensive.
Yeah, it looks super expensive. Plus, there's also air pockets within all the gloves you have on. So not only do you have these basically small robotic things that stop you grab a ball and it makes it feel like you're grabbing a ball, and then there's air pockets inside the gloves that inflate that also give you the sensation of touch. Yeah. And depending on what you're touching, the inflation will get harder. So you're touching a hard ball, it's going to feel harder. But say you're you're touching like a kitten, it's going to be kind of soft. Or you're touching water, you can feel kind of the waves go through it. And I've watched a few videos on it, and it's pretty interesting tech. It just seems very, very expensive.
I don't know how well that's going to work with VRMMOs, but in hentai games, that's probably the future.
Yeah. There's going to be some very lonely people that are going to spend a lot of money for the premium latex edition. That's what the game's going to be called. It comes with all full haptics.
But yeah, my worry about the vest is just heat. Like you said, just having your head in a headset's hot enough. If I was wearing a vest that had sensors in it, my God, that vest would not smell nice after 20 minutes of running shards.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking running shards. I play boxing sims.
Oh. Yeah.
After 3 5-minute rounds, I am drenched in sweat. If I was wearing a haptic feedback suit, that'd be awesome. Oof. But God, I'd be drowning.
One of my favorite games is Pistol Whip. Would feel great if there was actually some kind of like feeling in your chest when you actually get shot. But having to, like, I'm soaked when I play that game.
Well, I know that B-Haptics at the moment, so you say you play boxing quite a bit. I'm not sure which boxing game it is, but that whole suit and everything is already integrated with that game. So I know there's been a few people that have made videos on it and how it works, and apparently it's supposed to be very cool. I know that Virtual Reality Oasis made one. I'm assuming Eric for President talked about it. For some reason, like, a lot of like people from across the pond seem to get all like the really cool tech, and we're just stuck over here talking about it. So, I imagine they're closer to China. I don't know, but
so I want y'all to put on y'all game designer's helmet right now. So we've all played quite a bit of Orbus, which is in Denmo. You played Township Tale with me. So we've done a little bit of multiplayer combat in VR. What would be if you could like design a movement scheme like for a class? For a dungeon fight, right? So like you're going into battle, you're fighting a monster. What is like would be awesome to you? So I have an idea. I can go while y'all are thinking. So I have this obsession with the idea of having a grappling hook class, where one hand is a melee weapon and the other hand is a grapple. Which again, this is not a very accessible class, but basically you can pull yourself off of things, right? And I think I've seen this. It's almost like the Spider-Man mechanic in the Spider-Man game. I guess you could almost think Spider-Man, but like you could grab onto the boss and like stab into the boss, and to get out, you can grab onto your allies and pull yourself out. Similar to almost like the sword dash for the warrior, but much more often, and all your skills are based around movement. So actually, the amount of momentum you have when you hit the boss does more damage, so you want to be coming in hot, like flying by it and like swiping it, more than just running up to it and hitting it over and over. This is a very inaccessible idea, but like to me, this would just be amazing. Like I just have this mental image of just swinging in, hitting the boss, and jumping out and dodging with these grapples.
So I had kind of two that I thought up. And one of them I mentioned several times, so I'll talk about that one first. So in basically it would be like a beast tamer type class, right? So you're not doing much of the movement. You're actually commanding your pets, right, to do the movement for them, right? So I've always pictured either having like a lion tamer whip, or like the sword from Soul Calibur, where it's like the sword whip, right? And based on how you move the whip to issue your command. Your lion or whatever will, guard, attack, use an ability, right? And then you can pull your sword whip back into an actual sword. Then you can actually support while your thing's tanking, and fight off that way. That would be one of the like a beast tamer type class, some sort of pet class, which is always I think very difficult to get down. But I think that's a good way using motion controllers in order to make it work. My second one would be. And once again, this one's not going to be as accessible. It's going to be like the Dragoon class from Final Fantasy, right? So basically, kind of like yours, where you're going to vault way up in the sky with like pole arms and stuff. And then you basically do aerial assaults on this thing, and you're kind of like, kind of quasi flying all over the place doing piercing damage, stuff like that. So. Yeah.
I even thought about that in Orbus, man. Like some type of attack where where it slowly lifts you about 3 feet into the air. And it makes it so much easier to shoot over everybody's head to make sure you're able to hit. And it would be a slow movement up and a slow movement down, but you could just make it look epic, right? You could just make it look like this guy like grows wings or just has this aura come off and he floats up into the air and does his attack. And I just think that'd be so cool. And I know they generally don't like moving the player, but I think like a slow movement up would be just a really interesting way to do it. So it's kind of like a Valkyrie class, but not as extreme, I guess. Almost like, because I never played the Dragoon, but is it like what's the rocket class in Overwatch?
You talk about Pharah. No, it's so basically what you do is you have a pole arm, right? And what they would do is he would basically launch himself like hundreds of feet into the air, right?
Oh,
and then he would
okay.
And then you would just fly down and just like smash face into things. And you also had like a dragon that was like support with you, and that thing would either like attack or heal or do stuff like that. So I mean, like I said, not very accessible, but would be very cool.
Definitely. So what about you, Mishka? Anything interesting that you've thought up?
I mean, probably the least accessible out of everything, but give me a headset with built-in Wi-Fi and put me in a football field.
Ooh.
Yeah, let me walk.
Oh, right, I feel like, got you.
Right, like give me a huge open space and let me move. Because then there is no dissonance between like I'm sitting still and my character is moving. I want one for one. You know? If I take a step in real life, my character moves the same amount in VR.
Oh,
like that to me, right? If you had an infinite amount of space and you could move one for one, real life equals VR. That'd be it for me.
I mean, you definitely could do some arcade stuff. Like, if they ever get outside tracking, like where you can actually track outside and set up, like, almost like a paintball, like they have paintball places, right? Like, do that, except it's all VR headsets. And
so there is something like that. I live, right outside of Disney World, and we got a spot in Disney Springs called The Void. And you put on a VR headset and a full vest and everything. And the one I did was a Star Wars themed one. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd.
Yeah.
And basically, you would go in, and it was tracking everything. It was tracking your fingers. It was tracking your legs. Everything was tracked. And in your visor, the whole building was set up like an Imperial base. And you would walk in real life, and the whole area was mapped out. They have different scenarios. They got the Star Wars. They got Avengers. They got, a whole bunch of different ones. And it would change what it looks like in your visor. I could pick up a blaster, and I'm holding an actual blaster, and I'm actually shooting. And what I'm seeing is, the bolts shooting out of my blaster, hitting stormtroopers and whatnot. And I see the other people next to me, and we can be like, how many are there? 2. There's 4 of them. It was amazing. I guess it was inside-out tracking. I don't know. I want to go back and do it again whenever everything reopens. But it was that was the peak for me.
That
was the fact that there was
this
whole building. It was all mapped out in the visor, so they could change what it looked like. And I mean, I think it was awesome because I was the only person in the party that had any experience in VR, and so everybody else was like,
and you were just going.
Oh man, I was going crazy. I played Pablum, I played Onward, so stormtroopers start shooting, and I'm jumping down behind walls. I'm like, get under cover, come on, we got it. And they're sitting here, tiptoeing across because they're like, is there a wall there? I'm like, do you see a wall? No, get over here.
So Bristol, England right now is actually surprisingly one of the bigger places where VR tech is really taking off. My buddy David, he and his wife live over there now, and they go by this park all the time. He doesn't play VR at all. I mean, he's tried mine out, but he doesn't own anything. He's walking by the park and sends me a picture, and it's all these people in VR headsets connected via a 5G link, right? So there's in this park where there's a lot of 5G centralized around there, and it was a test bed to see if you could run flawless simulated environments in VR using the speed of 5G as the connecting point instead of using Wi-Fi. And I guess it went so well that they were setting up courses and they were doing exactly what you were saying, where they were just having multiplayer battles out here just for the hell of it, just to make sure everything was working well. I'm just saying, I mean, that could be the future, especially with the new X2 chips coming out, going into future standalone headsets. They just announced the renewed version of the Quest, which is going to be smaller, lighter.
Which did they announce it, or did they? It was a leak, right? And they didn't really have much information.
Yeah. There was a leak that I guess they announced it, but there's plans for a smaller one. It's gonna be smaller, lighter. I don't know if it's running the X2 architecture. I'm guessing this will be the S version of the Quest S, and then the Quest 2 will be running the actual X2 architecture. But with X2 actually having 5G capability, it will just completely boost your ability to play the game, and it will allow you to do a lot of virtual console stuff with the new Quest, because if you're having close to gigabyte download speeds anywhere because of 5G, if you're on a plan, well, it's then you could use some sort of emulation software to play whatever game wherever on your headset, right? I mean, I wouldn't play multiplayer games; there's still going to be lag, but I mean, what's it called? Shadowbox. I know that's a really popular one. some system like that could be implemented into the Quest, and then suddenly on the go you're having a computer that can run at 2080 Ti, sending the information to your little standalone headset, and I don't know. I think that's going to be the future of it.
All right, so I guess the last thing I wanted to bring up, because the one thing that'll fix any movement issues is a full dive, or in real world, the technology is being called Neuralink, which is being developed by Elon Musk, but also Valve has talked about that they're going into brain-computer interfaces. And Gabe Newell, talked about that they're actively working to use brain-computer interfaces in gaming. And that'll kind of cure a lot of the disconnect between your body and your eyes when you actually feel like you're moving. I mean, I don't know how far along this technology is, and I don't know what y'all have read about it, but so almost any technology that comes out would require a surgery of some sort. Would that be even something that you would be willing to do?
I like the idea of like fully immersing myself, and as somebody who trains MMA, I feel like that's like the only option VR fighting. But like invasive surgery for the sake of gaming, no.
It's just a little brain surgery.
Yeah, no.
I'd let some other people try it out first. I'll let them tell me what they think about it, and then I probably still wouldn't do it. But I'll let other people try it first. I think what we're closer to before we actually have any neural type thing is some sort of micro ocular contacts, right? So for like mini,
really,
like I think mini screens for your eyes are going to be much closer before getting the actual like messing with your brain, like a brain implant or some sort of thing that's supposed to like read like mental things. I think the technology of like two very tiny microchips on like an actual screen that you wear like contacts, and there'll be more AR than VR overlays, but I think that will probably happen much sooner than any Neuralink will happen. So
yeah, we didn't even talk about that when we were talking about when you were talking about boss fights in open air. Talk about Pokemon Go, but instead replace it with AR headsets in a park. Like that would actually be some really cool stuff. Yeah, AR might be the way to do outside boss battles and stuff like that. Now you'll still have idiots walking into roads and all that stuff. They're like, well, Pikachu was running across the road.
I thought it was a train type Pokemon. It's super effective.
It was Pokemon. Lenovo had that AR Jedi thing, and I almost bought that.
Oh yeah,
I was so close to getting it. And then I looked at the reviews.
yeah.
But AR, I feel like AR, that seems so amazing. Like playing D&D or any kind of Star Wars game. If you go outside and there's a goblin in your backyard, that just seems like it'd be so cool. Instead of having to sit there in my chair with the headset, this cumbersome headset, and I'm tethered to my computer and everything. If I could just walk out in the backyard and be like, oh, there's a Sith, let me just pull out my saber and fight it. I'm going to look like an idiot, but I'm going to look like an idiot that's so happy to be there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, you do what you love.
I will say I always said that, like, I'm more of a VR guy. I mean, I'm an overweight dad who really likes air conditioning. So, like, you know what? I'm fine in my room doing all this. But I think I'm a little more receptive to like you said, let somebody else do it first. But if they can prove to me it's safe, like, man, just being able to actually like lose yourself literally into a game sounds pretty amazing. But again, it's going to bring up so much, like the ethics behind that and complications. I think that's much farther out than some futurists say. But I do think that's ultimately where we end up. And the problem is, if it becomes too compelling, then, like, I seriously think VR addiction is going to end up being an issue once it becomes very prolific. And
it's already an issue.
Well, it's still a niche issue. I mean, I'm talking about, like, large-scale issue. Like, Ready Player One almost type issue where, like, large percentage of the adult population don't want to go to work and things. But I almost think we have to, like, there's a lot of physical interaction into a headset that is not what we'd want it to be, right? And that there's a lot that's going to have to be fixed with movement before I feel like we're there, where the average person is, because the average person still gets in VR and they're like, oh, it's fun, but there's a cable, or but this, but that, and all of those barriers have to go before I think it really becomes mainstream. And just the fact that a lot of games you have to stand up, I think gets a lot of people even. I really appreciate y'all guys coming on today, talking. We've went way longer than I was expecting to go, which is awesome though. So that means I got the right guest. We had a lot to talk about. It's been a blast, guys. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem at all.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations, you made it all the way to the end. I'd like to thank my guests again, Mishka and Denmo. This is my first time trying a more conversational episode with opinions instead of, just an interview. Let me know in the comments what y'all guys think about it. Thanks for watching, and give me a subscribe if you like the stuff I'm doing. Later.